Welcome to Making It with Terry Wollman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Wollman.
Welcome to Making It. I'm your host, Terry Wollman, and my guest today is award-winning composer, jazz pianist, arranger, and conductor from Los Angeles, California, Billy Childs. I appreciate you joining us every week, and I'd like to share with you my intention that inspires this podcast. Time passes quickly, and I've learned that we should do what's in our hearts and do it well without apologies or excuses. I encourage you to create your life and art in your own unique way and express your artistry with joy and with abandon. Be willing to work uncompromisingly for what you believe in. Success will have a better chance of finding you when you live your life with integrity, focus, and passion. Be selfish with your discipline and selfless in your performance. And don't forget to have fun along the way. If you're joining us in our live audience today, we'll be inviting questions and comments during the second half of the show. So make it count. Simply request an invite to speak, and we will bring you on stage to join the conversation. Let me tell you about my guest. Billy Childs has emerged as one of the foremost American pianist composers of his era. A native of Los Angeles, Billy grew up immersed in jazz, classical, and popular music. At 16, he was admitted to the USC Community School of the Performing Arts, going on to earn a Bachelor of Music degree in composition from USC. Childs was already an in-demand performer in the LA jazz scene when he was discovered by trumpet legend Freddie Hubbard, who invited him to join his band for what turned out to be a 6-year run of performing and recording. He landed his first record deal with Windham Hill in 1988 when he released his debut album, a personal favorite of mine actually. Take, for example, this. Billy has garnered 4 Grammy Awards and 13 nominations as an artist. He has performed with Yo-Yo Ma, Sting, Renee Fleming, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, Chick Corea, the Kronos Quartet, Wynton Marsalis, DeJohnette, Dave Holland, Ron Carter, the Ying Quartet, the American Brass Quartet, and Chris Botti. Billy Childs, welcome to Making It.
Hey, thanks for having me. And I really love that kind of paragraph of advice that like words to live by. I think that's real inspiring, actually, to hear.
Thank you. You know, when I was given the opportunity, it's been about 6 years actually, to host a podcast, I gave a lot of thought to what I wanted the intention of the show to be about. You know, not just how'd you get your break, you know, but, you know, more about the journey, the story, and not just music and art and creativity, but life itself. So I appreciate you saying that, Billy, because that's what's important.
Well, I think they're interconnected. I mean, there has to be a balance. I mean, the music in its best, you know, in my opinion, the music in its best representation illustrates things in life anyway.
Right.
They kind of, you know, life inspires music. The music that moves me, I love it to be like related to life, not really just an abstract computerized digital concept, you know.
Right. There needs to be something to say, not just the ability to say something.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That was, by the way, that was pointed out to me when I was in college studying music and falling asleep with my guitar, you know, and, you know, in my hands and, you know, the whole thing. You did it as well.
Yeah.
But it was pointed out to me, not by a teacher, but a neighbor who and a friend who had graduated from art school, and she was painting, and she said to me, you know, it's like great that you're in school, but don't forget to like live your life. You know, what's the point of having all the ability to say something and not having something to say?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. And making the decision to say the thing that you need to say. I remember I was playing with Freddie Hubbard. We were on tour in England, and I had a conversation with a drummer friend of mine, Carl Burnett, who played with Freddie. And, you know, I was at a crossroads. I knew I had ability at the piano. and I was playing with Freddie Hubbard, and we were playing straight ahead. And but also, this is like the late '70s. Also, there was the consideration to do like very like make a concerted effort to do commercial music, which I have no problem with.
Hmm.
People, if that's people's the people who have ventured in that direction, maybe that's their voice that they've discovered. It wasn't mine, but I didn't realize it wasn't mine so completely until I had this conversation, because I was kind of at a crossroads. Um, and I was talking to him. I said, well, should I just do like screw everything, just do what I want to do? Or should I do the thing that I know will kind of make me have a good living and give me like security?
Yeah. Good
Um,
question.
and
Important question.
and and he said, "Man, you got to do the thing that moves you, that inspires you." It was a very simple conversation, but somehow I was ready to hear it at that point.
Hmm.
And so I made a concerted effort to just do that. And since then, I've kind of adopted the philosophy that I've wanted to. If you're given, who knows where you get your talent from? Who knows where you get your musical aptitude from? But it could be God, it could be the fates, it could be chance, it could be, no one really knows. But if you have it, you're here on earth and you have this shot to develop it. I would want to develop it. Otherwise, it would seem like a big waste. It
Hmm.
would seem like I have some talent, but I use it to just accomplish this one limited aspect. I'm always in a quest for trying to learn something new and to gain more knowledge and to be able to express myself more accurately.
But it's interesting also to hear you say, I'm glad to hear you say that. It's interesting to hear you say that you feel a sense of responsibility that comes with the talent.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I do. I really, especially in light of like where the world is now,
Right.
this may seem like a new age kind of touchy-feely concept, but I think that the world needs art,
Yes. More than
and
ever.
and I think that I think that it's a very important to impart your impressions of the world um, on other people who are ready to receive that impression,
Hmm.
especially if it's a healing, you know, impression, something that attempts to make the listener experience more, experience better, feel better, do better. Um, then I think it's important. I think it's really important. And I think if you have extraordinary talent and you don't do that, or if you don't try to do it in the best way you know how to do it,
Hmm.
then you're shortchanging yourself and the world, I think.
I stand in agreement with you on that, Billy. Yeah, I think it's absolutely you're speaking the truth.
Hmm.
Yeah, your recent 2020 album is called Acceptance.
Right.
A few of your previous album titles include Rebirth, Skim
Hmm.
Coat, The Child
Yeah.
Within. Your debut album, take for
Yeah.
example,
I
this.
wasn't responsible for the name skim coat. I didn't even know what it was, what a skim coat was. I guess it's something in painting where
Yes,
you
I think it's the first. Maybe it's the
the
undercoat,
first
or
coat.
yes.
Yeah, I didn't know this was this is a trio album with Buster Williams and Carl Allen. I think Buster
Okay.
titled it Skim Coat. So you're
It's
gonna have to ask
yeah,
him on that one.
that one definitely caught my attention. What's the significance of your latest title, Acceptance? And also, how do you come up with album names as an instrumental artist? I go through the same, so I'm curious your process.
It's kind of hard, I always focus on writing the music first,
Hmm.
um, and then what the music suggests to me is what I'll call it. But especially in the music that I'm writing now, like classical music, like commissions, which have a specific concept usually that they want you to write about,
Hmm.
then it's kind of easier to um, to title it as
Right.
since the piece is kind of predetermined what the concept is.
Right.
Um, but with acceptance, um, there was the feeling of getting, time is incessant, and it just keeps moving, and you get older. As you get older, things happen that you just have to learn to accept.
Right.
People pass away, um, and relationships end, and
Yeah. Body
you
parts
know
were out.
yeah, body parts wear out. Um, people go. Friendships last, and
Right.
friendships don't, and your children are a great barometer for the passage of time.
Hmm.
Their relationship changes with you, and your relationship changes with them, and that's a whole dynamic. So you just have to. I figured, I learned that you have to accept things, and I look at it like kind of like the five stages of grief, where the last one, is
Is
acceptance.
acceptance. Yeah.
You go through all of these, kind of emotions that run the gamut from anger to bargaining to grief to despair to,
Hmm.
disbelief,
Right.
denial, and then finally acceptance. Um, so it had that kind of significance for me.
I, reminding me, I was first became aware of the five stages of grief and reading Elizabeth Kubler-Ross
Oh,
and when I was in high school because my dad died when I was 17 in an
oh,
accident.
that
So
oh
I was
man,
going
yeah,
through all of those and
yeah,
I
yeah.
needed
And you
a
were probably close to your dad too, right?
yeah, I was very close to him and so my world ended as I knew it
Yeah,
and I needed some sort of a roadmap to kind of climb out of that
yeah.
hole.
I mean, my father died when I was 33. I was much older, but still, it was the first close family member to die,
And you were
and it
close with your
was
dad as well, Bill?
very close.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I loved him, like,
Yeah, of course.
and he was the best. I must have, as a spirit before I was born, I must have had a hell of a vetting system, to pick out my family because
Right.
I had the best family. Two older sisters, great mother, great father. Very happy childhood upbringing. My dad would take me to the baseball games. I saw, Maury Wills, Sandy Koufax, and Vince Lombardi coaching the Packers. And we
Mm-hmm.
did all of these things together. Um, and he died of lung cancer. He loved playing bridge. And he would have bridge parties, and then
Mm-hmm.
everybody in the party would smoke, and you couldn't even be in the house. And
Right.
so I think secondhand smoke got him. Um,
Oh, he didn't smoke
but
himself?
he did, and
He
then he
did.
quit.
Right.
But
But he was just
maybe, yeah.
subjected
So
to it. Yeah.
yeah, it was brutal. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Our
So
parents' generation, smokers and
yeah,
drinkers.
yeah, drinking a highball and having a big steak with A1 sauce on it, and and smoking a cigarette afterwards, and then
Mm-hmm.
sitting and watching TV. It's
Yeah.
like it's the same. But yes, getting back to that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, acceptance of the five
Acceptance.
stages of grief. Um, yeah, you go. It speaks to all of that. My album
Right.
is attempting to, anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think it hits the mark. If
Oh,
when you
great.
not
Thank you.
if when you listen to the music, I'm speaking to our audience. Um, you can certainly feel that it's an appropriate title.
Yeah.
And it's as all of your albums are to me. There's a lot of emotion in it. It's you certainly have a great um, upbringing. Musically, you were exposed, you were encouraged
Hmm.
as a child, and you had great teachers and guides,
Yes.
but for you, I mean, as long as I've been listening to you, and both of our debut albums came out in 1988.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, that's a trip.
so like I immediately was drawn to your music when it came out. Um, well, years before we ever met.
Hmm.
But it always felt incredibly musical. It was never about the technique.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I mean, I think, there are things that serve other things. Like, I think
Hmm.
the way I compose music, harmony serves the melody. And I think technique serves the expression. Technique serves the statement, the thing that you're trying to say. You have to have the technique, and technique is not exclusive to Western European technique. Even though we're playing like instruments that were kind of developed in Western Europe, but sometimes like not, Um, but like for instance, Thelonious Monk had a different technique than Arthur Rubinstein, right?
Hmm. Right.
Who played with his fingers curved and played with back sitting straight. I don't know if Arthur Rubinstein actually did this, but I know the way they teach you in European classical music is to sit up straight and have your elbows a certain way and have your fingers curved. And Monk, just defied all of that. His hands were flat, but you could not play uh, what he played having this classical European technique,
Hmm.
and his technique was the way he played it was very effective because he didn't miss a note. Um, Even the notes that sound like mistakes or not, he's one. It's part of the vibe of it. So technique serves what you're trying to do. In my philosophy.
And it sounds like you're not rigid in a particular technique. You appreciate the technique, you use it, but you're open to altering something if it helps you achieve what you're trying to play.
Yeah, the ultimate goal is to say what you're trying to
Hmm.
say as accurately and as authentically as possible. And whatever means it takes to do that, do it, but practice it. Practice that,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
Can we talk about your album before we talk about like your early years and more about your family and upbringing and your mom and dad and your two sisters? Let's
Yeah.
talk about your album Map to the Treasure, reimagining Laura Nero.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm curious about what inspired you to arrange and produce this beautiful album, and also what some of the challenges were in coordinating all of these magnificent featured artists on your record. I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling. I know what it's like just to, put a rhythm section together or bring
Yeah,
in
I
a
know.
couple of special guests, and every song you
Hmm.
consciously made a decision with your producer Larry Klein to feature
Hmm.
different singers on different songs.
Yeah.
Great choice, and also I want you to share the story, if you don't mind, this unexpected phone call from Barry Manilow
I
about the
know.
record.
Well,
So,
first I'll tell you the story of how the record
okay.
happened. Um, like maybe 12 years prior to making the record, I did a session that Bobby Columbi asked me to do. He was producing, um, and Chris Botti was on this session. Bob Hurst, Greg Hutchinson, Bob Shepard, a
Hmm.
string group, me on piano, Heitor Pereira on guitar, a lot of people. Um, and during one of the breaks, I was talking about how I dug Laura Nero, like she was a big influence on me, and he said, "Oh yeah, well I knew her. She actually was. They were trying to get her in Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah,
and actually, they had Joe Henderson was in Blood, Sweat, and Tears at one point.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't either. So yeah, Bobby was telling me all this stuff, and I was like, and we both were like, we just spontaneously just was like, wow, I should do an album, of her music. So that stayed in the back of my mind for like maybe a decade.
Hmm.
But because the challenge was, how am I going to do it? And there were three approaches that I could take. I could take the approach where it was an instrumental album where I just played her melodies and stuff.
I
But
could see that. Yeah.
yeah, but the thing about that is like her lyrics are so important to the vibe of the songs. They're
Hmm.
poetic, and they're abstract. So and the lyrics had a profound effect on me too. So that idea was out, and then another one was taking a single singer and having that person sing all the songs, but then that person would be invariably compared to Laura Nero,
Hmm.
So then the last option was uh, have multiple singers, have a singer per song. But I was not really adept at producing singers.
Hmm.
So I was like, there's no way I'll have a mental, all of these different personalities, and trying to do the music. It would, my mind would fry.
It's a very
So
special skill set. Absolutely.
yeah, so I just put
Hmm.
it on the back burner and said, boy, I hope I can do this one day. So fast forward about 10 years. Um, and I talked to my manager, Miles Weinstein, and I said, Miles, man, I really want to.
I just lost you. There you are.
Hello? Oh, okay,
I have
yeah.
you back.
Speaking of Weinstein, he just called.
How perfect you conjured him
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
It's pretty
yeah. But
magical.
anyway, so I called Miles and I said, Miles, how do we make this happen? Um, And so he said, okay, you call some people, some record labels, I'll call some record labels I know. So I called a few record labels and they passed. And he called this one guy, and they didn't pass because they didn't like the idea. They passed because what it would take to do it was the budget was going to be really a lot. So Miles called Chuck Mitchell.
Mhm.
Chuck Mitchell used to head Verve Records.
Right.
Um, and I think if I get and I hope Chuck's not listening and says that's wrong, but I
Right.
think the way it goes is that he was running Verve Records, and Laura Nero herself went to Chuck because she wanted a record deal, and he passed, and
That's interesting.
and then she died like
Yeah.
shortly after, and I think he always felt regret about it.
Oh. Hmm.
And so and Chuck had liked my work with my jazz chamber projects, and so when he heard that I wanted to do this with Laura Nero, he said, "Yeah, yeah, this would be great." And so, uh, and he was heading this label called Entertainment One, which was distributed by Koch International. It was a smaller label, and he said, "Yeah, this would be great. We have this kind of budget, but I think we can make it work." And I said, "Okay, yeah, let's do it." And then we didn't hear from him for like about a month or something like that. And then Miles, I think, saw him at Dizzy's and said, "Hey, Chuck, what's going on?" Because we were talking about. He says, "Well, it's still in my mind, but let's hold off and let me call you in about a week, and the news should be really good." So about a week later, Chuck called Miles, and actually, he was like now the new director of Sony Masterworks, and
Wow, that's refreshing.
this is like the first project that he wants to do,
Hmm.
and they were throwing the red carpet at it. So I knew that Larry had done that Herbie, Joni Letters
Right.
album. And Larry and I went to theory class together. Larry got me on the gig with Freddie Hubbard.
Oh, you
You
did?
know,
I didn't know you guys had that you
oh
came
yeah,
up together. Yeah,
yeah,
very
we've been
fun.
knowing each other since we were 16.
Hmm.
Um, and he was Eddie Gomez, I was Bill Evans.
Hmm.
We just we played everywhere all the time. We were like joined at the hip.
Yeah.
So it made perfect sense. So with Larry on board, it was like then I called all the people I knew And Larry called all the people he knew, like, which was like Renee Fleming, Alison Krauss, Wayne
Yeah.
Shorter.
Lisa Fisher.
I called Lisa
You
Fisher. I
did?
called Esperanza. I called Diane. I called Becca Stevens, and
Lettucey?
no, he got Lettucey, and he got
Oh, Ricky Lee Jones
Ricky
also.
Lee
Yeah.
Jones, and and Sean Colvin, and
Ah,
I
man,
got
great
Chris
choice.
Botti in there,
Yeah.
and it was it was kind of like a joint effort, but it was a true collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
I did all the arrangements from the technical standpoint of what you would call like writing the notes of the music and all
Sure.
of that, but sonically and conceptually, Larry had some brilliant ideas, and the album definitely wouldn't be the same had he not produced it.
But it sounds like a collaboration, Billy, from what you're saying, in the best sense of the words, because you also brought him this beautiful palette to work with sonically with all of your unexpected orchestrations.
Right, yeah. The orchestrations and the shifts of tempo and the different directions, the dramatic like go things from loud wall of sound to nothing, and all of that stuff. The interaction with the rhythm section. But he had these great ideas sonically, like there was one section in Map to the Treasure that I couldn't figure out how to deal with it. It was like Laura plays this pattern really slow and then speeds up over the course of time. But if we did it that way, the song would be like 12 minutes.
Right.
And so I was like, how do we do this? And he came up with this brilliant idea of, let's make it an abstract, like a Picasso painting. Let's just put in these different sound effects, and then all of a sudden it goes into the fast section, and it shortened it, but it had a logical progression.
Mm-hmm.
And he had this great idea to take Save the Country and turn it into a ballad, like what's the word? An elegy, like an elegy type of song, So I did that. I arranged it from that, like in a Copland-esque way,
right?
Like a hymn or something.
Yeah.
And so it was a true collaboration conceptually. Excuse me. Yeah.
It's a magnificent album. It's so great to get to ask you about it, because I've never had the opportunity. So Barry Manilow calls you?
Yeah, I almost fell out of my chair. I was like, "Hi, this is Barry Manilow." I can't imitate his voice; it's been so long ago. But he said, "Hi, I just wanted to say I love this." And I was like, "This." I mean, if anybody knows songwriting,
he's a master.
And
arranging as well. But let's preface: you don't know him. You didn't know him before this phone call
at all,
right?
Yeah, I saw him one time in this restaurant in Hollywood, and I said, "Oh, yeah, I enjoy your music." He said, "Thanks," but I'm sure he doesn't remember, because it was like one of those, one of the million of fans that probably did that. But then for it to have him call me, I was like, "Wow, this is really." I've really, really, it really validated, what we did.
Yeah. That was really the question for me, is like, how did that feel to hear from an iconic artist that you don't know about some work that was really important to you and
it
close
felt
to your heart?
it felt really great. It was one of those things that makes you realize that you're on the right track, that you did something right. But also, it wasn't just like that Barry Manilow called. It's like so many people reached out to, from texts, from emails, from reviews on Amazon, from, people coming up to me personally. People still come up to me and talk about that album. And it struck a nerve. I saw on Billboard, the album was like number one or number two, and the three top albums was that album, the Barbra Streisand album, and Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett. It's like, what's wrong with this picture? Yeah, what's wrong with this picture? Like Lady Gaga, Barbra Streisand, Billy Childs. It
Yeah,
was
the universe
so,
cracked wide open for you
yeah,
and for everybody collectively for that
yeah,
project.
yeah, and it was great. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, thanks for sharing that
yeah,
some of the backstory on that.
yeah,
It's still to this day. Well, it's a timeless record. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I want to mention also here that people should check out Laura Nero, like
Yes, go to
her,
the
like,
source.
yeah, because she is she's brilliant. She was brilliant, and her music is timeless. It's 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 this amalgam of Broadway, musical type, like movie music,
Hmm.
brill building type
Right.
of disciplined songwriting, like Carole King or
Right.
um, Paul Simon or something. It's also doo-wop, gospel, jazz. She has Alice Coltrane, Joe Farrell, Richard Davis playing on tracks. I mean, it's a Miles Davis dug her.
Hmm.
There's a lot of pictures of her when she's recording New York Tinderberry, and Miles stopped by the studio. And she tried to get Miles to play on New York Tinderberry. Man, that would have been incredible.
Any idea why that didn't happen?
Yeah, Miles said, man, the music is fine without me.
Yeah.
Just basically, he
Yeah.
didn't want to do it, I
Right. It
guess.
was a polite no.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Emphasis on the no.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's going to have to be. Joe
Yeah.
Henderson told me one time that's going to have to be a no when
Right.
I
Yeah.
when I wanted to record one of our gigs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So
in our business, I find it's kind of nice when you actually get a straight ahead answer instead of
yeah,
a long-winded,
yeah,
we love you. We'll get back to you.
yeah,
And then it's
yeah, and
refreshing,
nothing.
especially back in the early days when we were started putting our records out,
Yeah,
when somebody would actually say, sounds great, not interested, I would thank them for their prompt reply.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. It's of course the best thing is to get a yes.
well,
You
yeah,
know,
that's
yeah,
much more
that's
enjoyable
yeah, yeah,
experience
yeah,
and productive. Uh,
yeah. Right. Yeah.
let, I'm curious about your first record. What um, what led you to Windham Hill and to making the record, and if you made it first and then shopped it, or if you got the deal and
Oh,
then
oh,
made
that's
it, and then also I'm also curious about it's a two-part question, but you did four albums that were within 1 to 2 years at the most of each other. And then there
mhm.
was a next couple of years between 1992 and 95 before you got signed to Stretch GRP. And I'm curious what that period was like for you when you
Yeah. Okay.
didn't have a deal.
So, yeah. Well, there's another story. I had written a piece called Lunacy and another one called The Coming of Spring, and it was like kind of like this amalgam of there's no jazz in it. There was jazz harmonies and
But it's
stuff, but there was
classical.
no improvisation. Yeah, classical fusion,
Hmm.
progressive rock, and it was all of these, and it was like kind of a real opus for me,
Hmm.
and it still holds up, I think. But I did that. These were two epic pieces. Like one was 10 minutes, the other was 13 minutes. And then I wanted to do an album. So on the flip side, I did like a collection of kind of jazz tunes, like 5 minutes each, like five of them or something.
Hmm.
And so I sent that out to a bunch of different labels in the mid 80s.
And when you say
Uh,
was it you or was it Miles or was it Michael Morris,
oh
our
no,
attorney or?
yeah, oh yeah, Mike.
Yeah.
No, actually, it wasn't Miles. I didn't know Miles until like 20 years later.
Hmm.
Um,
But did you
but
have representation? Did you have a manager back
no.
then?
So what happened was, Brandon Fields,
Hmm.
the sax player, he had a list of record labels that he sent stuff to, and I made this album, an LP. still have 30 of them. Maybe they'll be collector's
I'll
items
buy
one of
one.
these days. Yeah, it's called Midland, and so the first side is like jazz, and the second side is like these two epic compositions, right? So I sent them out to a bunch of different record labels, and the only one that a couple responded and said that polite no, and the other one uh, responded. The only one that responded positively was Andy Narell, and
Hmm.
he had
Steel drum player.
pro-
Yeah.
yeah, and he had a production company called Hip Pocket Records,
Right.
and he wanted to sign me to his production company to make albums for Windham Hill. So I said, okay, that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
At the same time, I had met Art Blakey in at the Mount Fuji Jazz Festival, and he had asked me to join his band,
Mm.
and I was like, yeah. So I came back home, and he said, call my management. So I called his management and never got an answer.
Mm.
But if I did get an answer, I'd have been moved to New York.
Hmm.
But since I didn't get an answer, I said, well, screw it. I'm okay anyway. I have a record deal, you know. So um, I did that, and so, but Andy only wanted the stuff on side A, the jazz stuff.
Got it.
He didn't.
Right.
He didn't want the crazy, progressive rock fusion stuff
Sure.
on side B. So that stuff is still sitting, and I'm going to release that.
Oh, you
You
have to.
know,
Oh, that's going to be
yeah,
great.
yeah, it's crazy. I should send you a sound file of
Okay.
it. It's pretty crazy. But so that's how I got that. So I did, and we did albums back to back to back. And Windham Hill wanted to establish themselves as a jazz label.
Right.
Where they screwed up, though, is that they called themselves Windham Hill Jazz. And the
Hmm.
problem there is that Windham Hill became synonymous with New
New
Age,
age. Yeah,
and
sure.
the antithesis of jazz is New Age.
Right.
So
Hmm.
when DJs saw Windham Hill Jazz, they just focused on the Windham Hill and just would say, oh, and just discounted the album before it even, many of them did.
Right. Hmm.
So, and in Europe, I couldn't get arrested.
Mm.
So that was, I think that was a marketing error. It'd be like, Blue Note wants to start a classical label, so they call it Blue Note Classical.
Right.
It
Hmm.
just
There's a
doesn't make
presumption
sense.
of, yes,
Yeah,
of style
you
and
would
genre.
call it something else.
Hmm.
So anyway, so that's how that happened. And then I had a 4-album deal with Windham Hill.
Hmm.
I think I had a 5-album deal, but after 4 albums, we parted ways, right?
Hmm.
And I had a manager at that time, a guy named Bill Trout.
Oh, sure.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and he, looked, for other labels, and Chick Corea was a friend of mine, and Chick Corea was starting Stretch GRP, and so the 2-year interim was me looking for a label. But in that interim, I got a commission to write for the LA Phil, and
Mm.
I got a commission to write for a friend of mine, Steve Houghton. And I was still playing sideman stuff, playing with Diane Reeves, playing occasional gigs with
Hmm.
Freddie Hubbard, um, even though that was around the time when his chops went out. So it was okay. But then when I got the Stretch thing, um, the the album came out, and it was like this fusion album, with various other types of music on it, but predominantly fusion, a la Return to Forever. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because Chick was comfortable in both worlds
yeah,
and genre wise, and didn't limit himself either. Like
yeah.
yeah.
But what happened was then the GRP from Stretch was bought out by MCA. And then I think Tommy LaPuma started running the label, and he heard the album and was like, "The hell is this? This is like fusion and then jazz, and then, I can't market this." So they let it kind of just drop off the shelf after like a month. After a month, they just stopped having anything to do with it. But the Vindication was one of the songs got nominated. It was my first Grammy nomination. So it didn't win, but it was great to get that Vindication.
Oh, that's huge. And it is. It's vindication, it's validation,
Yeah,
and I suppose that's something that as artists we need. Sometimes
yeah,
it's easy to wonder
yeah,
if it's okay the path that we're taking, or if we're supposed to stay in our lane or broaden out well, you and I both do artistically. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
um, so in that 3 or 4 years between, you still stayed busy because, like you said, you were getting commissions already back then,
Yeah.
which is kind of amazing,
It was like
don't you
around,
think?
yeah, it was around
I
my first commissions, yes, but yes, it was.
to write for symphony, to write symphony music.
Yeah, that was, I mean, that's what I was trained to do at USC. I studied composition. I
Yeah,
got a degree in composition,
and,
and from great teachers like Robert Lynn, who studied with Darius Milhaud, and studied with Ingolf Dahl and
mm,
Halsey Stevens and all of these heavy classical composers. I was fortunate to be able to study with these people. So it was natural to be able to write something for the LA Phil. When the LA Phil called me to write this piece, I was astounded and overwhelmed, but I was ready. Um, and that was because of it was a neighborhood concert, and I think it was inspired by um, they wanted an African American composer and a Korean composer because of the LA riots, and there was like this
mhm,
conflict between blacks and Koreans.
right.
Um, and
So
so
using art to bond the
yeah,
community, or
yeah,
heal
yeah,
the community and
yeah, and
music.
and it was a great experience. I was able to, they said write anything you want, just make sure it's 10 minutes, you and,
That's
and
a
that
lot
was
of
great.
notes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
10 minutes.
yeah. And I squeezed every one of those notes into it. You know.
But like you said, you were ready. You were
Yeah,
ready.
I think.
Your preparation was solid.
Yeah, and actually, I went to Bob Lynn's house when I got the commission. I went straight over there. I had graduated like 13 years before, but he still lived in the Hollywood Hills on DeWitt,
Mhm.
um, and I went over there, and showed him the scores and says, "Now this," and he said, "Well, this." It was like we had our composition lessons all over again. It was great.
Yeah, that's masterclass with one of your wonderful mentors that you had.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Mm.
it's kind of funny because it seems that it's not uncommon for you to get these out of the blue phone calls that kind of blow you away. Yeah,
I,
like to
yeah,
write for the symphony or
I've been lucky with that. Yeah, it's been, yeah. I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, there's been, yeah, these, yeah, the stars seem to align on some things, and sometimes it
yeah,
aligns against me. But I try not to focus on that. I focus on
yeah.
the stars aligning, in positive ways.
Well, let's talk about family for a moment before we
Yeah,
invite the audience to ask questions or make comments. Um,
sure.
I saw that you started performing when you were about 6 years old, and I
Well,
also
that's a
know
that's a
about one.
loose
Um,
that's a loose
okay,
definition, but yeah, yeah.
would that
It
be
was
just
like,
like for the at
you, you
church
know,
or in
you,
school?
you know,
Oh, you're gonna show? Great, right?
you know, like that.
And then
But it
everybody
was,
would politely applaud.
yeah, the parents, oh, isn't he cute? Yeah. But I got
Yeah,
serious when
that's
I was 14 when I heard Emerson,
when
Lake
you
and
were
Palmer.
14.
Yeah,
Well, I can see why. Absolutely. So, mom and dad, besides being supportive, were they artistic? I know one of your sisters, I believe one of your sisters, Kirsten's a playwright.
A
Uh,
musical playwright,
so,
yes. Yeah,
so is what did mom and dad do?
they were both teachers. My dad taught in a
Mm,
junior high, and my mom taught in an elementary school. My mom taught first grade, and
I,
my dad taught
I
junior high
forgot that.
math and
Yeah,
English. And
yeah.
he was also a counselor. But they both were incredibly attuned to music, and I grew up.
Hmm.
They had the best musical taste. You know, I grew up with Handel and Bach and Haydn and Mozart and the modern jazz quartet and Joe Beam and Barbra Streisand, Nat King Cole, and Herbie Mann, the
Hmm.
Swingle
Push, push.
Singers. Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Push, push. I bought that when I was in Midland when I was 14. Um, uh, but Memphis Underground, remember that? Ba ba ba
yeah.
ba ba
I
ba
do.
ba 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 da. Uh,
I do.
you know, yeah,
I love that. Mm,
yeah. So I grew up with all this music, and they loved music. They loved the fact that I played music. They loved everything about it. They loved the fact that my sister Kirsten used to dance with Bob Fosse, right? And
no
she
kidding.
was in yeah she was in the original production of Chicago with Gwen Verdon and and Jerry Orbach and Cheetah Rivera,
Yeah.
and then she'd worked with Anne Reinking, and she's she's brilliant, and she and I used to play little games, the creative games when we were, and my older sister Joy, they're both older, but Joy's the eldest, and uh, she wasn't a musician, but she loved music, and she knew a lot of, and she turned me on to jazz. She would come home with these jazz albums, Red Clay, these CTI albums, First Light,
Hmm.
usually Freddie Hubbard, Wes Montgomery, A Day in the Life. So Joy
Hmm.
kind of
Yeah.
turned me on to jazz, and Kirsten.
And also not just jazz, but like the Day in the Life album, that's the perfect blend of classical and
Yeah,
jazz together.
and
We were being exposed to symphonic arrangements, these beautiful
yeah,
string arrangements with straight ahead jazz
yeah, and
and pop,
actually, yeah,
Beatles
and
tunes.
actually, Don Sebesky was one of the great. Yeah, he did a lot of those, like A&M and
Yeah.
CTI. He was like the house arranger, and he was a big influence on me. As was Charles Stepney, who a lot of people don't know, but who worked with Minnie Riperton and the Rotary Connection, and later Earth,
Mm,
Wind and Fire, and then
hmm.
and also Peter Matz, Don Costa, who worked with Barbra Streisand. Those incredible arrangements. Um, so yeah, all of this was playing. So they were musicians.
Hmm.
I mean, they were not musicians, but they had excellent taste in. Oh, I also want to mention that I had a next door neighbor. And we're still very close friends, Leon Biscara, who
Sure.
I consider my first piano teacher, really, because he taught me
Hmm.
Cantaloupe Island on the piano.
Hmm.
He was a next door neighbor. I mean, how many kids would have a next door neighbor who was really a great jazz piano player and who was above them and who was a kind person also who would teach
Both,
them,
right.
yeah, a
Mm,
kind person who knew a lot about harmony and stuff and who like would let some little kid, like snotty nosed kid, hang around him and ask him questions and answer them patiently, you
right.
know, and be glad to answer them. That was Leon.
It sounds like you really had a destiny laid out for you because again, you were pointed and headed into such beautiful opportunities through your whole life, and you haven't wasted them. You've been a sponge. You were a
Thank you.
curious kid,
I,
yeah,
I was, yeah,
and you still
and
are,
I was, yeah, 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 I'm a curious kid,
right?
but yeah, I was, I was thrown into situations. I was put in situations where things could have gone bad or good and they went good.
Right.
I had great parents, and some people have terrible parents, like a bass player friend of mine, Billy Carroll, who was like a genius, but his
Hmm.
father did not want him to be a musician. And this guy was, if I had written The Rite of Spring and it had an electric bass part, he didn't read, but he could have learned it. He
Hmm.
was, and he
Hmm.
could sing, and, but he had a much harder, a rougher time about it.
Right.
So I thank my lucky stars for my parents, and also for my
You were born into
sisters
the
and
right family.
for,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and for the neighborhood I grew up in, you know, and the time I
Hmm.
grew up in, you know.
Right.
Um, so anyway,
The time that you grew up in because of what we were exposed to musically,
I think
or
because,
just the
yeah,
culture in our country?
all of the above,
All of the
and
above.
and what we were exposed to musically had to do with the culture in our country.
That's
Um,
for sure. Yeah.
and also there was just enough technology for us to enjoy the music over and over, but not so much that it took out the mystery of it. I think that
Hmm. That's
when
interesting.
you
Yeah.
listen to LPs, and the LP is the only way that you can listen to the music, where you have to take the trouble to put it on and do all that,
Hmm.
then then it's harder to listen to it over and over and over again. I mean, it's harder to listen to it and take for granted that you're listening to it, you know. And so
Right. Yeah.
you
You have
listen
to
to
work
it
for it.
more, yeah, you listen to it more deeply, right? And also because you don't have like YouTube to figure out, to look at videos on how it was made, and you know
Hmm.
look at things that kind of like lift the veil on what it is. So when you listen to, like, say, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, and Tony Williams all of a sudden line up on something that seems like it was telepathy, then you start ascribing spiritual things to it. You start you make it, you don't explain it as much technically. You explain it from a spiritual standpoint because you don't have the technology to 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 go in scientifically and like a laser explain what they did. You have to make up your reasons. But what that does is it exercises that muscle of connecting spiritually in music. And now
Hmm.
I think it's easier to learn how to play like somebody more accurately than it is to find your own voice and connect spiritually,
Hmm.
because I think that's kind of, it's a different world. It's a more scientific, a more computerized world. you know
Yeah. So, it sounds like you've got, um, do you have a strong spiritual practice, or is your spiritual practice your expression of art and the way you live your
it's
life?
I think the second.
Hmm.
It's an expression of art. I'm an agnostic. I'm a
Hmm.
person who
Okay.
doesn't know. I think it's like unknowable. And so I don't I think there is something that is guide at certain times. I know when I have a confluence of ideas that just keep coming, and it just seems like out of my hands. It just, oh yeah, of course, do this, and I'm working at hyperspeed.
Mm-hmm.
There
Mm.
seems to be like there's some guiding hand telling me to do it,
Right. Hmm.
um, but I can't say it is a guiding hand, but it feels like that, you know.
Right. And it feels like you're the
Um,
conduit,
yeah, it feels like I'm
the
a conduit,
vessel.
and the same with playing. So in that
Hmm.
sense, I think music is the most evidence that I've ever had of any spiritual aspect to the world,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful the way you just said that. Uh, I'd like to see if there's anybody in our audience that has a comment or question for Billy. Now would be a great time to to jump on board, just make a request and I'll bring you up on stage for a moment. I wanted to ask you also, before I get to my closing questions, what's changed in your life as you've gotten older, as far as your perspective about really what's important in life?
Um,
And what's remained the same?
well, I think I have a more of appreciation of time, the passage of
Mhm.
time. Um, I have more of a, I have, at the same time as I have more of an appreciation of my ability, I have more of a perspective of my artistic ability in relation to the larger issues of the problems of the world. I'm trying to
Which there are
keep
many.
things, yeah, I'm trying to keep things in perspective and not take things so seriously, like that
Mhm.
it causes me to have an ulcer or something, but at the same time realize that there are people who want to hear what I have to say, um, and to play, to focus on them, you know, and but also realize that there are other people who have other things that they find more important than me. In fact, most people, you know, um, but not. I guess basically, I mean, I do music, and ultimately, it's the organization of sounds to
Mhm.
make to to the pleasing organization of sound. I work very hard to organize sounds in a pleasing way so that the listener can get something out of it. There's nothing more
Mhm.
than that. Uh, and it's not like and other people might have the job of like stopping World War III, you know. Um, so
An
I
equally important job.
yeah, and maybe even more important,
Yeah,
but
of course.
so it's a matter of perspective, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, that I
Mhm.
try to impose upon myself as I get older.
I know you were joking, partially joking about not getting an ulcer, but how do you not get an ulcer? Like, what do you do for balance in your life to stay mentally, physically, spiritually healthy? Do you
I
exercise?
tr-
Do you meditate?
yeah,
Do you?
I exercise.
Mhm.
I There's a couple things I do. I have like I have this incredible deal at 24-hour fitness, so I can just go there anytime. But I do that. I also have a
Right.
jump rope, and also in LA there's these cool things, called street stairs, which are
Yeah. Yeah. They're all over
continuations
the
of
city.
streets. Yeah, they're continuations of streets, but with a staircase, and I run up and down those things.
Hmm.
Um, it's a great way to see LA,
Hmm.
and so I do that, and I try to watch my diet, and I, try to stay engaged, try to you know have interesting conversation. I hang out with my friends, I don't really. I'm kind of a
And you
homebody,
choose your friends well. Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
think
you're.
the friends that I have, I've had for 30 years,
Hmm.
or longer, you know. There's a friend of mine, Carl Wirtz, who he and I, at least 2 times a week for the past 40 something years, have breakfast somewhere, you
You
know.
do? That's great.
Yeah, he's like my absolute best friend. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, one of them anyway, but yeah, probably, yeah, like he's like my, yeah. So that's what I try to do. It keeps me from being stressed out.
Right. So you have a strong family and friend base,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
keeps you grounded. Hmm.
yeah. My kids are great. Holly, just my wife. We kind of parted ways, but we're still very close.
Hmm.
And my sisters. They're all family. I consider all
Where
family.
are the
So
kids now? Are they still in
they're
LA?
here. They're here in LA. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, that's great. So you get to be in their lives and they
yeah,
in yours.
yeah.
That's really wonderful.
Mm.
Before I hit my closing questions, what are you working on now? Because you've been so busy. You've just been writing
Yeah,
around the
it's
clock.
it's crazy. I I'm working on my a saxophone concerto right now. I just finished a violin concerto and a string quartet. Then after that, I have to write a piece for trio, string orchestra, and then after that, I have to write a piece for jazz quintet, string orchestra, and big band. So I have to finish that,
Wow.
and then I work on a piece for the LA Master Chorale, my jazz chamber ensemble, and Anna Kiko Myers. And if that weren't enough, down the road, um, I want, I'm working on writing an opera. I'm
Oh, that's
still trying to
wonderful.
get that. Yeah, it's nonstop. It's endless. And I have another
Is that some?
saxophone thing. Yeah,
Is
crazy.
that something that you would conduct?
No, 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 no. I conduct like in the studio.
Yeah, I
Like
know that you
I'll
do.
conduct
Yeah.
this. Yeah, I'll conduct a string orchestra or an orchestra.
Hmm.
In the studio, but I wouldn't. I'm not Dudamel or anything. Uh,
Yeah.
the, yeah, I probably wouldn't conduct the complex music that I write, for an orchestra because it would, I don't have the conducting technique to do that, but arrangements and stuff like
And
that I can do.
and when you go through these periods of time where you spend hours every day and days and weeks on end writing, composing,
Yeah.
arranging, orchestrating,
Uh-huh.
do you do you um does it compromise your piano playing? Do you feel like any of
Yes,
your
it does.
technique and ability slip away?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Because,
how are you managing that? How are you balancing that?
well, two ways. What I used to do when I predominantly operated through my band was I would just write challenging piano music, and then I'd
Hmm.
have to learn it.
Right.
Um, but now, if I'm writing a concerto for a saxophonist or a violinist, um, then I'm not practicing anything. So what I do is I just have to go back to scales and stuff like that, and
Right.
and play through Bach, and play.
Hmm.
I usually like to play through Bach, like inventions, and then I'll also play a lot of tunes like standards and stuff like that.
Hmm.
You know,
That makes sense.
yeah, and
There's
try
there's
to get
something
my
there's something reassuring for me to hear you say that because I have the same struggle.
yeah,
If I'm away from my instrument because I'm producing something or writing, arranging, I feel it slipping away.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
but even Joe Sample said that to me years ago. Joe had said,
Wow, there's a piano
if
player.
he's
Yeah,
you're not kidding. Yeah.
yeah,
And so I paid attention to everything that he told me.
yeah,
He basically, I think what he had said was, if I don't play for a day, yeah, I can hear it. You know, if I
yeah,
don't play for 3 days, other people can hear it. You know, that's
yeah,
how quickly it slipped away from. So
yeah,
that was a wake up call for me, but also reassuring because I'm sometimes baffled by artist friends that we have. So many of them are very disciplined, extremely disciplined. Uh,
hmm
Chris Botti's a great example who you worked with for years. He loves to
yeah,
practice
mm, yeah,
too, and it comes across. But there's so many other people that like they don't really practice when they're in between,
yeah.
and they're a little rusty, but they're still
Like
magnificent.
like Freddie Hubbard.
Right.
Yeah, Freddie never practiced. He would just warm up. He'd go, "Blah!" and then just play in the dressing room. And then when we go on stage, he'd play stuff that only Freddie Hubbard can play, stuff that shouldn't even come out of a trumpet,
Right.
should come out of a piano or an orchestra or
Hmm.
whatever. He was a genius. He was a genius.
Hmm. But that's just something some people just have. They're born
Yeah.
with.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I just, just keep trying to, I'll play my little things, and, I'll
Yeah.
eventually get back up to the level, when after a week or something like that,
Right. You get back to
especially if
your
I'm
fighting weight.
touring.
Yeah.
And if you're in front of people and you're touring and you're playing in front of people, man, that'll get your chops up quick, because
Yeah.
people are paying
Yeah.
money and things are happening in real time, and you better get it right,
And that level of focus really pulls you
Yeah,
to the highest bar.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing
Let me ask
worse
you
than like, okay, go ahead.
no, go, no,
I
go,
was just
go.
going to
What were
say
you just going to say?
there's nothing worse than like sitting at that awful like silence in the audience when they know you screwed up, you know, and everybody knows, it's apparent. And there's like this
Right.
silence, like, oh yeah, well, we'll look past that and applaud the next thing, you know?
Well, it's kind of interesting because you have to be able to become a master of forgiving yourself in the moment and then going back
Yeah.
and revisiting that in a constructive way.
Kenny Warner has, the effortless mastery thing. That's his whole
Right.
credo. You know,
Yeah.
he's a guy you should like interview on this show.
That's a
He's
great idea. Can you put me in touch with him?
Yeah, I can give you his
Okay.
info.
Yeah. Boy, that
Yeah,
would be a masterclass. I'd love to speak with Kenny. That'd be great.
yeah,
Great suggestion.
or Terry Lynn too.
I've had
Terry
Terry
Lynn.
Lynn on the show.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh okay.
and
Well,
it
then
was,
there you go.
and no, great, absolutely.
Yeah,
Thanks
yeah,
for suggesting it. She was wonderful.
yeah,
She's she sees something that needs to get done and gets it done as well. As far
yeah,
as her
yeah. The
involvement
gender
in
justice. Yeah.
diversity and women,
Uh huh. Yeah,
in music, it's
for
been great,
sure.
but
It's
also
very
musically.
important work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My closing questions, and then we can end with anything that you would like to talk about. Since this show's called Making It, what does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally?
Making it. There is no making it, because it's an ongoing process. Making it
Hmm.
suggests that there's a point in which you've reached the end game, and then that's it. But I don't think there's making it. It's like this is both professionally and in life. It's like
Hmm.
you're constantly evolving. Change is the rule, you know. So I don't think there is any making it.
I actually agree with you, and
Yeah.
it's nice to hear you say that. But it's great to hear people's answers. But that's why the name is a verb and not a noun. It's not called made it either.
Oh, really? Oh,
It's
yeah.
about
So making it.
it
Yeah, it's a
making it.
process.
It's the
Yeah.
process. It's the journey, the walk.
Yeah.
You know, the picking yourself up and dusting yourself off every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, something doesn't go the way you had wished it might.
What do they call that? A gerund? It's like the
I don't.
ing, making it.
Oh,
I think that's what they call
okay.
it. Making it like it's an ongoing process. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Cool.
My second question: can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Um, I would say, uh, there's no magic. Work, practice, repetition. Um, repetition is key. Like you just have to repeat stuff until your hands and mind get acclimated to the
Hmm.
thing you're trying to do, and comfortable with it. Also, I would say have faith in the hipness of your own ideas. And what I mean by that is like if you have an idea that you like, it may be as valid as Herbie Hancock's or Stravinsky's or whatever, but you have to work like hell to make it, because it's not just enough to have the idea. You have to get it out of root it out and analyze it and figure out what it is and how to best communicate it. But have faith in it, because, the thing that makes you, just in awe of someone else's music is like when you listen to it, or their art or anything, when you listen to it or see it or experience it, everything is a new discovery. Each moment of like the passage of time in the music, it's a new discovery. Oh, I never would have thought to do it. I discovered a new way of approaching that, right? And so I never would have done it. When you're right, you couldn't do it because they did it. That's how they approached it. But at the same time, what you do is a new discovery for everybody outside of you. So the idea could be just as valid. It's new to everybody listening to your idea. So you just have to work at it. So that would be number 2. And number 3, I would always stay true. Don't be deterred. Always make choices that bring you closer to think in terms of the ultimate of what you want to do. Like, don't think in terms of, I just want to make a living, or I need to make ends meet, or I want to get this gig. Think in terms of like what you want, the fullest expression of what you want to do, and then make the little choices that propel you ever closer to this. Like one of those games where you want the marble to go over here, and it kind of hits this thing, and then it kind of you tip the thing so that it eventually goes to where you want it to go. That's like
you lean choices. In to where you want it to go, right?
Yeah, with literally. Your choices. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think I need to do this thing that way, because that'll get me closer to this ultimate thing. So that's what I think.
Great tips. My closing question is, at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh, man. I don't know, man. I don't know anything. I don't know what my younger self was. I read a science fiction story about a person who was 1,000,000 years old. It's an argument against immortality. It's like, and this person who was 1,000,000 years old didn't even remember that they were born. They thought that they always were, because 1,000,000 years, you can't remember back that far. So that's kind of how I feel now. I don't even know who the hell I was back then. I look at words and music, and that's the clue that's the only clue that I have of who I was. I know there's something about me that's the same, but there's something about me that's different. I don't know.
That's an interesting, being an artist, because you do leave some sort of a trail of who you were.
Yeah.
Or clues to who you were at that point of your life.
Yeah. Maybe I don't know. Don't be afraid of being hurt, I guess, is would be one, and it's, that's, I don't even know how to explain that, but maybe, or don't be afraid of confrontation so much, and just say what you want, and say, and not so much say what you want, but say what needs to be said, more, I think that might be something I might tell myself.
Well, on that note, is there anything else that needs to be said by you in closing our conversation?
Said it all. I'm getting tired of the sound of my own voice.
I know the feeling. I'm not getting tired of your voice, though. And this is It's been really great to just catch up with you, Billy, and but also to have an opportunity to delve into your point of view, your perspective, and your journey.
This is a great show. Yeah. And man, it was an honor to do it.
Oh, well, thank you. It's great to have
Yeah.
you. And I really
Yeah.
appreciate you carving out a little bit of time because I know how busy you've been and that means a lot to me. So thanks for taking the time to do that. I look forward to continuing just staying in touch with you again too. And I'll circle back and get a couple of recommendations and send me that fusion stuff that's never been released.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'd love to hear
Lunacy
that
and
too.
The Coming of Spring. Yeah. Diane Reeves is
Yeah.
singing on one of them.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. Diane Reeves and Jimmy Johnson on electric bass, who is like the man on electric bass.
He's ridiculous. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
Yeah.
the beauty is, nowadays with the way the music industry has gone, that's something you could actually consider releasing.
Yeah. I have
Yeah.
the masters for it. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
who knows? Well, everybody stay tuned for more interesting classical and jazz music from my guest, Billy Childs. And
Yeah, man.
I wanted to thank our audience for listening today and joining us, our virtual audience, and the audience that listens to us in streaming and everything. Oh, and we hear you and see you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I want to encourage everybody to stay safe and stay inspired. And
Mhm.
Billy, it's just a pleasure to talk with you again. Thank you so much for
Great.
joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Really, my pleasure. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Take
Take
good care.
care.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Wollman.